Okay, let's begin for the afternoon workshop. So, essentially, what we want to try and achieve a little bit in this session is to make ourselves just a little bit more productive, to see how we can run code within an environment in our browser using Chrome DevTools, and hopefully maybe just have time to answer a few common questions that have come up for people in terms of either how do I do this, or this isn't very clear, how do I start to debug my code. We've all run into many issues, I think, whether that be during setup or just we're getting compilation errors when we try and edit our app.js file in our CodeFlix project. So hopefully we can just look at a few ways that we can do this, help debug, help be a bit more productive, so that we're not spending half an hour looking for that capital K rather than that lowercase k, or these sort of common errors that we might run into. Alright, so again, if you want to follow along, you're more than welcome to do that. We're going to use two environments today. We're going to use the Visual Studio Code app, and we're going to use Chrome DevTools. So you might want to have both of those open in front of you if you want to follow along. It should be streaming on YouTube now as well if you can't see the screen very clearly. Alright, so first thing, I think many of you have come across maybe the issue where you've made some changes in your CodeFlix project and you look at your app or your server that's running in the browser and you can't see any changes reflected. Usually the most common case of this is you haven't actually saved your file. You've made these changes and you haven't saved it. So what most developers do is they just turn on the Autosave feature in Visual Studio Code. If you haven't found that yet, we're going to find that today and just enable that now. Has anyone found it so far? Could you tell me where it is? It varies a little bit between operating systems, but so mine, is definitely just under File, and you tick the autosave like that. Who hasn't got that? Just raise your hand. Have you all got that option? Under File? Even on Mac? Yeah, I thought on Mac it was slightly different, but I could be wrong. No, it's there as well? Okay, alright, well, that's the easy way to do it, right? We're going to go a little bit more in depth because there's not much to talk about otherwise in terms of the autosave feature. But no, I thought it'd be harder than that, but I'm glad that they've sorted out the interface and it's a very easy link now to the autosave feature. So let's look a little bit behind the scenes and how we change some settings then in Visual Studio Code if we want to create this custom environment, if we want to create a really productive environment for ourselves. Autosave is one of those features because it's so commonly requested. It's obviously just now easily accessible under the File menu, which is great. If instead it isn't, you might have something like Preferences, or there are some really useful shortcuts, which on my computer is Control-Shift-P, and on Macs it's probably Command-Shift-P. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and then if you press that now, you should bring up this sort of prompt. So this is just going to search within Visual Code for certain things. You can see, one of the most commonly used functions as well is just to format the document. So what that should do, if you've got some sort of formatter enabled, is it should sort out all your indentation for you, as long as you've correctly closed functions and all stuff like that. There will be a shortcut as well to that, but if you wanted to see whether that command exists for you, you can literally just type the words format document up there in the top, and that will list all the commands that are built into Visual Studio that might do that function for you. So you don't have format document? No. Anyone else actually have format document? Do Control-Shift, it pulls up the prompt. Pulls up the prompt, but when you type format document, it's not there, right? Yeah. Okay, so maybe we have to install an extension first, which is something else we're going to look at, right? How can you make yourself more productive? How can we enhance the features of Visual Code to add some extensions to it and make our life as developers easier? So one that should be there is if you type Preferences you should have some options for preferences at least. So Control Shift P or Command Shift P, is that working? Yeah?
No, the thing is that you need to have the first
so that is Control Shift and P.
If you erase that first, nothing shows up.
Yeah. But
I don't know how it's called.
I'll try and see if there's a menu shortcut to that as well. Essentially what we're doing... essentially what we're doing is viewing the command palette. So on my laptop, that's under View, the menu View, and then click on the command palette, and that should bring up that prompt for you. And then we can type our commands inside of there. So we've got a couple of options there. Hopefully they exist for most of you. If you type preferences, we've got two options. We can edit the raw file directly. So this is a file that sits on your computer in JSON format, and we could type JSON code to edit the settings. What most people prefer is to use the UI version, right? To use the GUI, to use the more user-friendly option of the settings. So if I click on that now, we should see that, again, the first thing that comes up, the most commonly used setting, is that autosave feature. So that's what I thought we were going to have to do with some of you. So essentially, what ticking that has done is it has set autosave to the value of after delay, and you can then manually set a delay timer here. And that delay timer, 1,000, that seems quite large. What units are that in? Is that in? 500? Yeah, but what units is it? 500 what?
Milliseconds.
Milliseconds, yeah. Minutes would be not very useful, right? Oh, I'm still waiting for it to save. So yeah, this unit is in milliseconds. So if you're setting that, make sure you just set a normal value. So that's 1 second, yeah. 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. So if I don't type anything for 1 second, my file will automatically save itself, and then hopefully those changes will get reflected in my server. Yeah, so it's a lot more interactive, my environment. I'm not constantly having to remember to press Control S to save it, or some other way of saving my file. Yeah, because it's a common mistake, right? We forget to save it, and then we wonder why our changes aren't being reflected in our code. We think we've done something wrong, but it's just what we have essentially, right? We forgot to save it. Alright, of course there's other settings in here. We can change the font size, indentation, so when we hit a tab, what does it do? Gives 4 spaces by default. All these options, right? So just have a look at these, play around with what ones you might want to edit in some way. Autosave is probably the most common one, but of course there are other useful features in there. What's that? Mobile phones? Fonts. What about fonts?
What fonts do you guys recommend?
That's so personal again, right? So it usually comes down to what? Just selecting a serif font or a sans serif font, yeah? So with or without the curly bits. Whatever you prefer for being most readable. Yeah. Preference. I'm not going to go into type space and fonts and stuff. Maybe later, right? Cool. So hopefully now you know how to use the preferences menu and turn on the autosave feature. What are some other common things maybe we can do with Visual Studio Code? Well, we could add some extensions. I don't know if you've noticed this little box over here, similar to your, so it's in the same panel as your version control. And if you click on that, what we can do is we can search for some extensions. Now what I might have had enabled to allow me to format the document is something called, what have I got enabled in fact? Yeah, I think I've probably got Prettier installed. It's a code formatter. Yeah, so some people want to format their code and get it automated and done automatically for them. Prettier is one thing that can do that. I think Beautify also does a similar thing, right? They're 2 common extensions. So you can just search for the extensions up here. Of course, you could just type in Prettier. select that one, and it's as simple as just clicking the enable button here if you haven't got it installed. Some of you might want to try installing that now.
What does this one in particular does? It
So
colors the...
So it's a code formatter. So in other words, yeah, it will sort out your indentation. It will sort out your linting, your coloring of your syntax for you, stuff like that. Yeah, and that's the shortcut for it. So remember this format document command. That's where it's coming from. It's coming from this extension, prettier. Yeah, that's why I can just format my document like that in one step.
You know the extensions on Visual Code?
Yep.
Once installed, you need to reboot all of them.
Yeah, so often, it depends on the extension, but often you will then need to, once you've installed a new extension, to reboot Visual Code for the changes to take effect. Yeah, it needs to load that module in on the startup of the Visual Code app. Yeah, one of the best ways, I guess, is just to search Google, search for most useful extensions to Visual Studio Code, see what comes up, see whether it fulfills a need that you have as a developer, and install it. For now, though, of course, you're learning elegance, so rather than getting the extension to do it for you, maybe it's a good practice to just do it the slow way, right? Practice your carriage returns, practice indentation, practice semicolons, all things like this, rather than getting an extension to do it for you. But over time, you might want to rely on some external tools to speed up your development process. Another thing, after you've sufficiently learnt, you might want to use some sort of snippets. What are snippets? Anyone know? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so essentially, if we can see this little demo here, so I don't know if you can see what's happening in the video, but this guy here, he's installed the simple React snippets. Then to create a whole new class component, he just typed CCC, hit tab, and it created all the code, the boilerplate code to create a component for him. Yeah, so he just typed IM, we've got a whole import statement, IMRC, import React and component. Yeah, you see, so it can save you a lot of time, once of course you learn the aliases, and once of course you learn what each of these things does, and you understand what the code is doing, rather than just using it blindly. Yeah. So maybe not at this stage something to install, but later on some snippet extensions can be really, really useful. Any questions or any other environments that people have got set up on their own computers? They use some things to enhance their productivity?
Do we need to set up this environment as of now? Or?
No, so that's what I'm saying, right? Now you're learning, so you want to learn how to do it the long way. You want to learn how to create a class, how to create a component, how to use import statements and modules. Later on, once you've sufficiently learnt that and you understand it, then rather than typing out 7 words each time, you might just want to type out 2 letters, hit tab, and it does the same thing, right? Can really speed up your productivity. All right. Cool. Any other things from Visual Studio Code that you can think of or you might want to add?
I think I need several actually.
Several?
Yeah.
Okay. Give me some highlights. What things do you use? What helps you increase your productivity?
Where can you find a list of all the things you've done? Where you can,
List of all the things you've done. That's called your memory. I don't know if you have that written down anywhere.
show you install extensions. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So click on the extensions tab. Yeah.
So I think there's this. Wow, I don't quite
Yeah. So I've got a few as well.
VS Code icons.
VS Code icons. What is that one? Oh yeah, I know what one does.
So the icons, if it's HTML, if it's CSS, so kind of.
Yeah. So rather than just having this generic file icon here, it will give you a different icon based on the extension, right, of your file. So you can see at a glance, oh, this is my CSS that I need to edit, even if you've got a really long name and the file name is cut off.
Even the folders, it makes it beautiful because the files they look different as well.
Okay, yeah. What's that one called again? Ed?
VS Code icon.
VS Code icon. So if you wanted that functionality, VS Code icons, that top one, right? There it is. I just have to click install there. Let's do it, right? It shouldn't take long. Yeah. Do I need to restart or not activate?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it just works straight away. There we go. You can see the difference, right? Now I've clearly got a CSS3 icon for my CSS, JS for my JavaScript. What's that one? Test file, and so on. Yeah. Thanks. Cool. So yeah, have a play around, have a little Google search, see if there's things that enhance your environment and make coding a bit more enjoyable and productive for you. Yeah. That's just a quick snapshot. Yeah. It's a very personal thing again, but any questions before we move on to DevTools? No? All right. So we briefly touched on DevTools this morning. So if you want to open Chrome DevTools again, how would I do it? Inspect. How do I get inspect to come up?
Setting, go to the settings on the right, the 3 dots on the right.
So I can go to the 3 dots, yeah?
Just right click.
I can go to settings.
More tools.
Oh, more tools, is it?
Yes, developer tools.
And developer tools, right. So that's one option. We've also got the shortcut Control-Shift-I or Command-Shift-I, or you can just right-click on the page and inspect. Yeah. So you've got 3 methods there to actually open it up. In terms of the display, that's those 3 dots in the top right. So you might want to have a split screen display so you can see both your web page and your DevTools at the same time. Where am I? Yep. Or you can stick it on the bottom or just have it full screen. To actually run some code, so I think Catherine was asking earlier about how do I just run some JavaScript code? Yeah? Do you know how to do that yet? Or do you want me to go over it?
In console.
In the console, so you think you do it in this window here? Okay, so essentially, yeah, that's a JavaScript environment, and I could do it in there. That's useful really only for quite basic commands, I think. Yeah, so if you just want to do a bit of maths, I don't know, I've forgotten what 6 plus 7 is, and then I can see clearly that that calculates the result for me, treats it as JavaScript and calculates the result. That's cool. Yeah, I could do the same with strings. What happens if I add a string of 6 and a string of 7? What do I get? Oh, I spoiled the result already. Oh, annoying. But yeah, it doesn't add the number 6 and 7. It concatenates, it squashes together the strings. So it keeps the 6, keeps the 7, and just combines that into one string. Yeah, so we'll talk about type differences and how this plus operator can vary later on depending on the data types and what values we use. But anyway, that's a little simple check, right? What happens if I just run a very, very simple statement? It's not what we used this morning though. What do we use this morning? What tab in DevTools do we use this morning? Yeah, we use the sources code, right? So if you wanted to either import some external code, JavaScript code, or you wanted to create a brand new snippet, then you can use the sources tab at the top. You have various options if they're not visible. Sometimes snippet isn't visible to begin with, so you might need to select it from the right hand arrows.
Sorry, Greg.
Yep.
Does it say
How do you get to that window from Chrome? Because I'm getting something different.
Yep, so the easiest way again to get into DevTools is to right click anywhere on your page. Oh, but you're in Firefox, right?
You need to pull out that.
So let's try working in the same browser just to make things easier today.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah. Firefox also has development tools built into it, but let's keep the same interface if we can.
Inspect,
for everyone.
right?
Inspect, yeah. That should pull up your DevTools, and then you should have those tabs at the top. Yeah.
And I should go to and then how do you put it like that?
Full screen. Full screen was top right hand side, the 3 dots.
Yeah.
And it's this overlay, this sort of mirror image thing.
Which one? Sorry.
The one on the left that says dockside. I think it's right at the top of your screen. No?
Yeah. Yes, but which one do you choose? Ah.
Aeneas, can you come and have a look? Do you mind? Thanks. So Aeneas will just get you on the same screen. Yeah? Obviously, snippet-wise, we can put something in a little bit longer than just a very, very basic statement. Yeah, we could write a mini app in here, pretty much, yeah, and run that code and test that app. And we can save these snippets for later. We can rename them, give them whatever name we want.
No, I was just trying to follow the.
Yeah, so we got some user data there. I think we were just trying to get rid of the duplicate names in there. Don't know if anyone saw that. David Hasselhoff reproducing himself in a previous workshop that we did. There's very scary images associated with that, but it's an old lecture if you haven't seen it. Yeah, so essentially it's just predefined code that we can run and test and all that sort of stuff. So sources is a great little tab in DevTools to take a bit of code, perhaps out of CodeFlix itself. I've shut CodeFlix now, but yeah, perhaps you want to take something out of your app.js and import that into DevTools to just test isolated function or something like that.
It's windowing on Mac as well, so but essentially if you want to create a snippet, so you're just going to
Let me see if I've got a very simple working example of CodeFlix just so I can show you. Where are we? See what this one's got.
so if you want to respect
Yeah, so I think this CodeFlix app is right at the start by the looks of it. How do I just check that on the server? What command do I run to start my server? Yeah, thank you. Just checking I hadn't lost you after I was faffing around, right? Okay, all good, right? That's absolutely right at the start. So if I wrote a console.log inside of my app.js, let's say we just write a message, say, hi, I am often used for debugging, something like that. We don't want it inside a paragraph. Stick it up here for now. Return. Okay, so where will this console.log appear? How will I check whether this message has outputted anything? In DevTools, right? Yeah, we go to DevTools. What tab do we go to? The console tab, yeah, it makes sense, right? So now, if we, let's just see what we've got. So this is the page that I'm monitoring at the moment, right? I'm monitoring the incognito window. Instead, I want to monitor the React app window. So now if I go to the console, look, there's my message. Hi, I'm often used for debugging. Yeah, fantastic. So we might use that to check the value of a variable. Sometimes our variables are returning undefined, we don't know why. We can start putting in these console.logs, breaking things up, divide and conquer, right? We divide the problem into smaller and smaller chunks, just check each step is returning what we expect, and gradually find the source of the error. I think Ricardo said yesterday maybe companies spend up to 90% of their time and energy just debugging, right? Not writing actual new code, and is worrying and concerning. And yeah, gradually throughout the course we introduce you to better ways of testing, and hopefully making sure that you're more productive and you're not having these issues, so you're just wasting a lot of time debugging as opposed to writing beautiful code. Yeah.
Debugging is fixing bugs?
Yeah, debugging is fixing bugs, yeah, exactly. Removing bugs, debugging, yeah. Nice. Alright, what else can we do with DevTools? Network tab you're going to need later on. Anyone, any idea what this does? Say again? No? So if I refresh the page,
Oh, it's showing how quickly it's working.
yeah, it can do quite a few things, right? But don't know why that's popped up, sorry. How do I get rid of it? Okay, cool. So when I refreshed my page, I got a lot of things listed here, right? Bundles, chunks, blah blah blah, yeah. Favicon.ico, the little image tag. Where's it all come from? Yeah, so network is monitoring your network traffic. What is getting passed between the server and the browser, or the back end and the front end. Anytime some sort of network or transfer of data and information happens, you should be able to view that inside of the network tab. We will look at this a lot more later when we're making calls to databases, we're fetching information from the back end. The network tab is going to be really, really useful to see if any errors have happened at a certain stage in the communication process. Yeah? So these sort of chunks and bundles are just what's happening behind the scenes. We're using something called Webpack, which is bundled into Create React App. That's bundling up our whole application, splitting it into different chunks and bundles in hopefully the most network efficient way. So it's trying to lower the bandwidth, lower how many calls we make to a server, and all things like that. Yeah, but that's a nice way of checking. We get the timers here, so if we have a process that takes a really long time, we should be able to see that as a long red line or a long line. We can detect what process is stopping the page from loading or just taking a long time to load. So really useful for just monitoring your network traffic. Yeah. Any questions? It's just a brief intro at this stage, but gradually these things will start falling into place. Kieran, yep. Webpack is built into Create React App, yep. So every time you, essentially every time you start up your server, right, your all the files that we created, your app.js, blah, 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 they're not staying as distinct files. You're not sending like hundreds of files across the network. Webpack is bundling, it's a bundler, yeah, it's packaging, it's a packer, and it's putting those all into just a few files, hopefully in an efficient way, just to minimize network traffic, which in turn should be a better experience for the end user. They're not waiting for lots of files to come across your network. It should speed up your application. Yeah, that's why we use things like Webpack or Parcel, these sort of extra modules and programs. Yeah, cool. Any other questions? No? So let's look a little bit maybe now at how do we actually inspect our page, look at the layouts. One of the common questions that I think someone has asked, and indeed I think Anas, you said, explain to the group, but you said essentially what the first time you wanted to check mobile.
Oh
yeah?
If you wanted to check the responsiveness of your website, you can click on the icon at the top left, so the second icon on the top left.
Second icon, nope, I'm not. Oh, this one, sorry, yeah.
The one with the little especially when you start playing with flex and grid, if you want to check what it does to your website, you can go into responsive and then select
I'll tell you what, let's look at this one instead, right? This will be a better
yeah.
example.
That network is to try and solve network issues to optimize the website.
For which one? Sorry, the network tab now. So the network tab, yeah, can help you debug if certain files aren't loading or they're taking too long. We'll look at it a lot when we look at databases, calls to the back end, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, but for now, just know it exists and you can do it through DevTools. Right? But back onto what Aeneas was saying. So we have this little button in the top left that looks like a phone. Once you click on that, you should see that the layout of your web page changes. So it's off at the moment. This is what it normally looks like. When I click it on, it changes, and then
Yeah, so then you can play with it and see what it would look like on various devices. So if you go into responsive,
so there's a little drop-down menu here. Yeah, we can.
and you can select whichever device you want. So you say the iPhone, whatever. So yeah, so you'll see how it will display in reality on the user's iPhone. So yeah, that's very helpful, especially when you start playing with media queries, flex, grid in CSS, that sort of thing. So you can immediately see how it will display on the user's devices.
Yeah, so the old way of doing that was get your mate, can you have a look at the website on the phone, can you have a look on the tablet? Of course, you need to either have access to all these devices that your end user is going to have, which is impossible nowadays, right? There's such a multitude of different devices that we can display apps on, so otherwise we'd have to install external software that simulated a mobile device or simulated a tablet. Now it's just all built into the browser, right? You go into DevTools, click on the little phone icon, select your drop-down menu to, fair enough, we can't simulate every single device, but there's a good selection here, and I'm sure there's a way to add more. I've never done it, but I'm sure there's a way to add more devices here that we can simulate, probably under the edit options, right? And and we can clearly see that the layout for the iPad is distinctly different from the layout for a phone. Yeah, so this is possibly achieved through media queries or using modern layouts that Ricardo talks about tomorrow using Flexbox and CSS. It's possible to make them dynamic just on their own by using certain features of CSS. Yep, so media queries, I can't remember exactly what task number, but I think it's around 5 or 6. You will be creating your first mobile layout that, depending on the size of the screen, so depending on whether your screen is big, bit smaller, yeah, so now it's simulating a phone, maybe now it's into sort of a tablet view, maybe now we're moving into desktop view, and then super big screens, does it change even more? Yeah, it does, but I've run out of screen myself, yeah. So, yeah, essentially you'll be introduced to media queries in CodeFlix task number 5 or 6, something like that. Yeah. So you're happy. It will be parts of Workshop, I think. I don't think it's an own Workshop itself, but mobile responsive design or mobile first development. Have you heard of that term, anyone? Mobile first development? Yeah, so it's very important nowadays. What's higher? The percentage of users who connect via a desktop or a laptop, or the percentage of users that connect via a mobile phone? It's mobile, right? Yeah, nowadays at least 60%, probably higher, of the visitors to your website are going to be browsing via a mobile phone. So therefore, does it make sense to design this really fancy big layout for big screens, or to have as your default, your best view, or the one you put the most time into, as your mobile view? Yeah, so mobile first development. You design with the end user in mind, the one on the mobile phone, and then maybe you write an extra media query or some other sort of feature to then account for the other users, the lower percentage that are going to connect via a desktop or a laptop. Yeah, so really important principle. If you can talk about mobile first development in an interview, then hopefully they'll be reasonably impressed, right? You're not just learning how to write code, you're understanding how businesses think, catering to their needs, designing software that is beneficial to your end user rather than just what you want to produce. Yeah, show that you're putting the user first rather than your own needs and learning first. Yeah.
How do you go back to the other view?
How do I go back to the other view? So at the moment we've got this button clicked up here and it's highlighted blue, so that shows that we're in the device toolbar mode.
Yes.
So if we just click that off, that will now display my normal view.
Because I still got like I clicked it and I still got the.
Yeah, but you're definitely in that. So if you go back to DevTools, and in your top left, you should have that icon, the mobile icon. If you unclick it, unclick it. Yeah, okay, again, I can't see at this stage why it's not working for you. Either someone else will take a look at it, or we'll just have a look afterwards why it's not working on your computer. Yeah. Alright, so one last feature that I want to talk about as well. I'm talking about, Anas is talking about, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it? Awesome. So just the layouts, yeah, the box model. That's it. Is that what you want to talk about? Yeah? Yeah, cool. Are you talking and I'm interacting, or can you just come over so we can hear you?
Yeah, I think some of you this morning were wanting to see. Well, basically, let's start. If you can inspect each element in your application. So if we click right, we do inspect.
So what have I done now? When it right clicks and inspect, look at how this is changing over here. It's highlighting a certain bit of code. Yeah?
So normally you'll be able to see like a little box that will display properties like the margin, the padding, etc. in your element.
And that should be listed under. So essentially, yeah, your first bit is the code itself. The second bit is going to be some styles that are applied. And if we scroll down in the styles tab, we're going to get to what Anas was talking about. That, right?
Yeah.
But you wanted to maybe change it in some way?
Yeah, so some people were asking this morning what the difference is between margin and padding, for example. What's that? Sorry?
No.
Yeah? Okay. So padding essentially is how much distance there is between your elements. So say you have your box and the element inside it. So let's say some text, yeah? And the margin is the distance between two different elements, if that makes sense. The distance between them two. So for example, in your application right now, you don't have any margin between your pictures, but you could potentially add some space if you wanted to. So
Should we do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as well, if you're just testing out what a style will do, at the very top of the styles tab, we can just click inside it, and we have to be on the element that we want to change. So I'm just going to check that we're on that element again. So we're currently on that image. Do we want to change the image or maybe the container outside of it? Should work on the image, right, in terms of this code.
Yeah, I guess.
Let's give it a go. Maybe that anchor. Let's see. So if we're just experimenting, we don't want to apply a style yet. We just want to view in DevTools what would happen if we applied a certain style. Well, then we can do the same thing, we can just write some CSS directly in line here under the element.style option. And what do we want to change? We want to change the margin first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can type.
So how would you change the margin, guys? I mean, it's fairly easy and straightforward, but
Just margin.
yeah. So we type margin. Yeah, and then what?
And then the number of
10 pixels.
cells that you want to.
10 pixels.
Let's make it quite big just so we can definitely see the change. So rather than 10 pixels, what can we use? 100 pixels.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I don't know what this is going to look like. Probably very ugly, but there we go. We can see
Yeah.
clearly that something's happened. Yeah. What has happened? Well, where is our element?
The element, the black mirror, that was the element, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
Yeah.
So the margin pushed
image
everything
anchor.
else?
It's they
Mhm.
push everything inside the box.
So
The
the
four
space between
sides.
the border and the pattern.
So well, that's not padding because that's that.
So the box model at the bottom shows us what it is.
Yeah.
Margin is around the outside of the element. If we add a border in, we'll clearly see the difference, right? So we'll do that
Yeah.
next. So margin is around the outside of the element. Sorry, I'm taking over. Come on. You can say. No. Border is just around the element itself, right? It's still outside, but between the element and the margin. And then padding is actually inside of the border, yeah? To pad out the actual element itself. So let's change a few of these other properties. We've changed the margin. Let's now change, let's do a border next. Sorry, I shouldn't have given it away again, but what
Yeah.
colour would you like your border? Or maybe what style, what size, and what colour?
Border color.
I want to use the shorthand, so I just want to type border. Border's shorthand for the three properties that I just mentioned.
Just use red.
Well, what style do you want to give it?
Well, we just want to see how it looks, so something, make it red so we can see it
Yes.
very well.
Well, that's
The pixel first.
Nice, yep. So we said three things. We said the width
Yeah.
of the border.
First.
That's the first option. The second one was
Color.
Color pixel.
no, color actually comes last.
Yeah, it says when it's solid or dotted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
there you
that,
go.
we call that the style.
Style,
Yep. So we've got border width, border style, and next we have border color. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to write those three things now. So width, how wide do we want it? Again, make it reasonably wide, but not 100 pixels, guys. Otherwise, we're going to run out of room on the screen.
2 pixels or 3 pixels is easy to spot.
How many? 3.
3, yeah, this one.
It should be big enough. Yeah. Let's make it a vivid color, and we should definitely see it.
Yeah.
So next was the style. What style options do we have? Dot.
Solid.
Just dot like that.
Dotted.
Yeah, dotted. See what's come up? Dotted. And then, oops, I shouldn't have hit tab already.
I think somebody wanted red.
And yeah, what color do we want? We want it to be
Bilal wanted it to be red.
Yeah. Something that you can see.
white. We could see, but yeah. All right, let's make it red.
There you go.
So clearly now we can see that we've got a border around our element. Is the margin inside or outside of that border?
No, usually outside.
Margin's outside, yeah? The box model, margin goes outside of the border. Next we're going to add some padding and see how that changes. What do we think is going to happen?
Of course, the border and the picture, the black mirror, will go to space between them. So they have-
Yeah, the
You mean
picture gonna shrink.
inside the box there will be space between the image and the
and
border.
the border.
Yeah.
Let's try, let's experiment.
Let's space out, let's space out.
How do I change my padding?
Padding.
The word padding, absolutely. Hit the tab. What value do I want to give? Not 100 pixels, a bit smaller, right? Oh, how many, right? Yeah. 5. Can we make it a little bit bigger?
10 pixels.
10.
Can we use, let's use different units. Let's use
EM.
EM, yeah. I was going to use maybe a percentage or a width of the screen, width of the viewport. Anyone know how to do that? Viewport width?
No, the viewport with no
No?
percentage.
Red.
That was a beautiful R sound, but yeah, say that again.
Red,
What word?
No, M.
M. Oh, M's.
M.
Oh, I thought you. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, rem. Yeah, that's where the R sound comes. Yeah, rem. Relative. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, coming back to padding. So let's make it.
Rem.
Yeah. I got it. Yeah, that's the relative unit. Yeah, but instead I want to use viewport width. Yeah, a percentage of the viewport width. So VW are the units for that. Let's say maybe 5% of the viewport width can be padding, something like that. Yeah. So I can just put. I can just put 5 VW. Yeah. All right. We can see it if I highlight it like that. Yeah. It's not clear because they're both black and black, but what has happened now? The padding has gone where? Inside of the border, yeah? So hopefully we can clearly see from those 3 properties how margin and padding is different. That was the original question, right? What differs between margin and padding? So margin is placed outside of the border or outside of the element. Padding is placed inside of the border as part of the element itself, technically, but I suppose the anchor's still highlighting the whole thing. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird discrepancy, but maybe just think of it in terms of the box model and how it relates to the border, if you put it there. Any clarity on that you can add?
Is there any questions?
I have a question
Yeah, nice.
about the images.
Images, what about them?
Because I want to upload the image to the cover, but I don't know how to do it because do I need to import in the top?
Yeah, you definitely need to use an import statement to get
For
each individual image into your project. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Any question on the box model or layout? Or?
Is there any other measurements you can use, like VW, and that are like exclusive to the borders or the pattern or whatever?
Yeah, so what other units can we use? So we had a few suggestions. Firstly, we just use pixels.
Yeah.
We can use points. Old-fashioned way, like a typewriter thing, I think, isn't it? Points, yeah. Very old-fashioned unit, but it does exist.
Percentage.
Other options? What we got, guys? How can we?
Percentage.
Yeah, percentage. So that would be a percentage of the container that it's in, I think. As a relative, percent is a relative unit, but as REMs, yeah.
How do you pronounce that?
Rem, yeah, as you said, rem, yeah. I was just, liked your accent when you said it, so that was all I was getting at. You can use M's themselves, right? So they're not related to a root setting of our document. They're just standard units. This is the relative version of the M's based on the standard of the document. What else have we got? We've got the ones I just used. We've got VH for relating to the the viewport height. And then we've got V width relating to the viewport width. I can't think of any others. There probably is some others, but I've got a nice YouTube video I can probably share with you from some guy who's a decent designer, and he talks about all the different units that we can use in CSS, the relative ones versus the non-relative ones, the static ones. I can share that if you want on Slack. Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions on layouts, dev tools, productivity? No? All good? Information overload today. There's a lot to take in, right? But yeah, thanks for your attention again, and we'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers, Ness.
Do you play with snippets?
Yes.
Do the challenges?
Yeah.
Play with